she gasped, her face turning pale as the audio played. "Turn it off. You're humiliating me," she shrieked. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "No, you did that to yourself. I, 30M, have been with my wife 29F for about 5 years. We met through mutual friends at a local bar. Hit it off pretty fast. Honestly, things seemed good at first because we both shared the same sense of humor and got along with each other's families. My father and mother are pretty chill people, so they accepted her right away. Her parents seemed friendly too, especially at the beginning. I hung out with her father a couple of times, and he was always talking about random business ideas that never really took off. He wasn't pushy about it back then, so I just shrugged it off. My wife's mother was the classic, let's host a dinner for everything type. She would invite us over for every holiday, birthday, or random event you could imagine. Even though we got serious fairly quickly, I never saw any massive red flags. My wife and I got engaged after a year, then married the following summer. The first couple of years were the typical newlywed phase, lots of date nights, weekend getaways, and just enjoying our time. But slowly, things started changing. She became distant. Not rude or anything, but she spent more time glued to her phone or going out with her sister-in-law. I figured she was just stressed with whatever was going on in her own life. I tried to be supportive by giving her space. Our bedroom life was okay, just less frequent. I asked if anything was wrong, but she said she was just busy or tired or not in the mood. I didn't push it because I didn't want to come off as insensitive. After our 3rd anniversary, I noticed she was becoming weirdly secretive. She'd keep her phone face down, lock it more often, and step outside to take calls. I remember this one time she got a text late at night, and when I casually looked in her direction, she practically shielded her screen like she had nuclear launch codes on there. When I asked about it, she brushed it off with a flimsy excuse about friends' drama. Part of me wanted to trust her, but a bigger part was screaming that something was off. Things escalated when her father randomly brought up my wife's big life changes during a barbecue at their place. He was smirking in a suspicious way, which caught me off guard. I tried asking him what he meant, but he just changed the topic. Later, her mother asked if we were doing all right financially. I said we were fine. That's when her parents exchanged this glance I couldn't decode. It was almost like they knew something I didn't. I shrugged it off but made a mental note to figure it out. A few weeks later, I found myself up late. My wife had passed out on the couch after a movie night. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wouldn't have touched it if not for the bright screen lighting up the whole room. I saw a message preview that read something like, "Thinking of you. Can't wait to meet again." I froze. I tried to unlock her phone, but she had changed her passcode recently. I felt my heart racing. I told myself not to jump to conclusions without proof, but I went to bed that night feeling uneasy. The next morning, I confronted her about the text. She brushed it off as a friend's inside joke. Honestly, I wanted to believe her, but something about her expression wasn't convincing. A day later, I decided to do a little sleuthing. I remembered that her sister-in-law is pretty loose-lipped after a few drinks, so I invited her and a couple of friends to a small get-together at our place. During that night, I casually steered the conversation toward relationships and online dating. I threw in a random comment about catfishing just to see how my wife or her sister might react. My wife rolled her eyes, but her sister-in-law got oddly quiet, like she had suddenly remembered something important. The rest of that evening was pretty normal, but I caught my wife and sister-in-law whispering a couple of times. They seemed to be talking about me in a hush-hush way, probably thinking I didn't notice. My gut told me I needed to dig deeper. I knew something was up. She had changed. The distance between us had grown, and I was left in the dark. I felt like a third wheel in my own marriage. Soon after, I discovered a weird email she left open on our shared laptop. It was some receipt for a fancy dinner reservation in another city that I sure as hell didn't attend. I confronted her and asked if she went with a friend. She gave me this vague story about meeting an old friend from high school who was really wealthy now, but insisted it was innocent. She said the friend was just showing off the expensive restaurant scene. I didn't buy it, not for a second, especially because she'd never even mentioned any high school friend like that before. That's when I realized I needed concrete proof. I didn't want to blow up our whole marriage without being sure. But I also knew she was definitely hiding something major. The entire vibe around her had changed. She'd become too guarded, too defensive, and too dismissive every time I asked basic questions. It was like she was trying to keep me from something big. I hated that feeling of uncertainty, so I came up with a plan to find out exactly what was going on, and it wasn't going to be pretty. I started by quietly gathering clues. I checked our shared laptop browser history, but it was mostly random YouTube videos and news sites, Nothing suspicious there. Then I realized she might have her own separate accounts that I didn't know about. So I dug around the living room to find any physical evidence. One afternoon when she was out, I came across a small notebook tucked under the couch. Most of it had harmless notes, but one page had a guy's username written next to a dating site name. It wasn't a popular site like Tinder or Bumble. It was something more niche, supposedly for elite singles or some pretentious label like that. I felt my stomach tighten. I decided to see if that username was real. I made a fake profile on that site using a random photo of some model I found online, just to lurk. Sure enough, I found a user who had a bunch of flashy pictures and a super cocky bio. This guy looked like he was loaded, wearing designer suits, posing with fancy cars, sipping cocktails on yachts. His location was a big city about 2 hours away. I didn't see any direct link to my wife, but I recognized the same username. So I took screenshots and saved them on my phone, planning to confront her if needed. I was still missing a step though. I had only found a guy's profile. I had no clue if she was definitely talking to him. Then I spotted an even more damning clue. One of his pictures matched the background of that restaurant receipt she had. It was some rooftop spa with a fancy city skyline. It clicked. That was probably the night she'd gone to meet a high school friend. That friend had to be this rich guy. Around this time, her sister-in-law accidentally slipped up during a random chat. She was telling me how my wife had started talking to this wealthy dude she met on social media. I pretended to act clueless like I didn't care, so she kept going, telling me how the guy was apparently spoiling her with gifts. My sister-in-law tried backpedaling when she realized she was giving me too much info, but it was too late. I already knew way more than I'd expected. My wife was basically living a double life, meeting some fancy guy on weekends while stringing me along. I felt angry and humiliated, but I didn't want to end things without exposing the full extent of her lies. So I came up with a crazy plan, catfish her using that same rich guy's photos. I had to pull off something elaborate, though, because I wanted bulletproof evidence. So I saved a bunch of his pictures, ones I hadn't seen on my wife's phone. I made a brand new fake account on another platform, thinking she might also be using more than one app. I chose a cheesy username, something close enough to his original one, but with a slight twist, so it looked legit. Then I wrote a profile that mirrored the vibe of that elite single site. Lots of bragging about money, travel, and high life. Next, I contacted her from that fake account. I was nervous as hell writing the first message. I introduced myself in a slick, over-the-top manner. Within an hour, she responded. That's when my heart sank. She was actually flirting with what she believed was the same rich guy. I tested the waters, asking if she was still seeing that other guy, meaning me. She replied with some half-joking comment like, "Don't worry, he's boring and clueless," which was basically a goddamn confession. My head was spinning. She was actively mocking me. The weird part was how easily she seemed to lie without remorse. Over the next few days, I kept up this fake conversation, playing the role of a flashy dude who wanted to meet again. She complained about our marriage, calling me stingy and uninspiring. That stung badly. She even mentioned that my family wasn't as successful as she hoped, which told me so much about her shallow perspective. It made me question every memory I had of us. Like, had she always been this shallow and I just never noticed? One weekend, she told me she was going on a girls' trip with her sister-in-law. Meanwhile, on the fake account, she told Rich Guy me that she was free for a night out. So, I pretended to set up a date. She took the bait. We arranged to meet at this upscale bar in the city. But instead of me meeting her as the rich guy, I showed up incognito with my best friend. We got a table in the corner, wearing hats and hoodies to stay low-key. She walked in, done up in a classy dress, looking around for a guy who didn't exist. I used my phone to record her from a distance as she sat there checking her phone, sipping on an expensive cocktail. She was clearly waiting for Mr. Moneybags to show up. After about an hour of her texting my fake account, which I ignored just to make her sweat, she got visibly annoyed and stepped outside. That's when I texted her as the fake guy, "Sorry, got stuck in traffic, be there soon. Wait for me." She stayed another half hour. I kept filming everything, capturing the moment she finally gave up and stormed out. My heart was thumping the entire time because I knew I had her in the palm of my hand. But I wanted one final confrontation, one that would really drive the point home. A day after that fiasco, I decided to confront her. But I wanted to do it in a way that would guarantee she couldn't spin the story. So, I invited her entire family and mine to a casual dinner at our house. I told everyone it was just a little gathering to celebrate an upcoming holiday. My parents were cool with it. My wife's father and mother were excited for free food, apparently. My wife acted normal, but I could sense she was a bit on edge. Maybe she guessed something was up because of how weird I'd been acting. The evening started out fine. My mother helped with the food, and my father chatted with her father about sports. It was all very civil on the surface, but I could see my wife checking her phone repeatedly, glancing in my direction with a nervous expression. Finally, after dinner, I stood up and said I wanted to share something with everyone. I grabbed a little portable speaker and my phone. I had compiled all the screenshots of her chat with my fake account, as well as some voice notes I had recorded on my phone where she admitted certain things while talking to the rich guy. I'd also spliced in the video I took of her waiting at that upscale bar. My wife's mother looked confused. My mother looked concerned. My father just had a stunned expression. My wife's father demanded to know what was going on. So, I started from the beginning, how I suspected my wife was cheating, the weird messages I saw, and how I discovered the rich guy she'd been seeing. I explained how I catfished her using that guy's own pictures and got these recordings. Then I played the audio clips in front of everyone. My wife's face turned white. She started yelling at me to stop, try to grab my phone. But I pulled away. Her father began shouting that I was humiliating the family. Her mother covered her mouth, looking mortified. My father and mother just watched in stunned silence, probably wanting to see how it would all unfold. My wife tried to argue that I was invading her privacy and that this was just a mistake. But I wasn't buying it. I showed the screenshots of her calling me boring, stingy, and how she was bragging about hooking up with this rich guy. I even showed the group text where she agreed to meet him on a night she told me she was on a girls' trip. The house erupted in chaos. Her father started berating me for publicly shaming his daughter, saying things like, "Who the hell do you think you are, humiliating my child like this?" Then he turned it around and said I was lucky to even be married to her. That's when I lost any last shred of sympathy for them. I told him straight up that his daughter had been lying, cheating, and insulting me behind my back. He fired back that I should shut my mouth if I knew what was good for me. My father jumped in to defend me, telling her father that it was his daughter's fault we were even in this mess. Suddenly, my wife's father tried to act physically intimidating, stepping toward me. My friend, who was also there as a guest, stood up, ready to intervene, but before it could escalate to a fight, my wife's mother grabbed her husband by the arm to calm him down. Then came the part one I'd been waiting for. I revealed that I had a file full of all the evidence saved on multiple devices and even sent to my personal email. So, if they tried to play dirty or deny what happened, I could prove it to anyone. I also said I was prepared to move out and consult a lawyer about divorce. My wife burst into tears, yelling that I was destroying our marriage. She tried to flip the script, acting like I was the villain for catfishing her. That's when I lost it and practically shouted, "What marriage? The one you were trashing while you chased some internet sugar daddy." Everyone went silent. Her mother tried to console her, but she shrugged her mother off. Her father threatened to sue me for defamation, which was ridiculous because everything I had was factual. I told him I'd be waiting for the lawsuit, with my own lawyer ready to present the evidence. The tension was so thick you could feel it, but in a twisted way. I felt relieved. No more secrets. No more second-guessing. Everything was out in the open, and the only thing left was to decide how to move forward. When my father and mother realized how serious the situation was, they insisted we leave. I grabbed a suitcase I had packed beforehand. My wife tried to stop me, still yelling about how I was overreacting. She had the nerve to say it was just flirting, it didn't mean anything, despite all the dates, the gifts, and the nasty stuff she'd said about me. Her father kept egging her on, telling her she deserved someone better anyway. At that point, I'd had enough. I told them all to get the hell out of my house. She kept yelling while her family stared at me in pure rage. It was like a tornado of accusations, but I didn't care. I told them to leave or I'd call the police for trespassing. Eventually, they left in a huff, cursing under their breath. So that's basically the chaotic ending to my marriage. I stayed with my parents for a few weeks while I started the divorce process. In the US, you typically have to file a petition for divorce in the county where you reside, so I reached out to a local attorney first thing the following Monday. I gave him all the screenshots, recordings, and the timeline of events. He said it was more than enough proof of her infidelity. He explained that in our state, it could speed up certain parts of the proceedings, especially if there was any debate about alimony. I didn't want to get into a drawn-out courtroom battle, but I was prepared if she decided to fight. My wife tried to contact me multiple times, switching between apologizing and accusing me of ruining her life. She tried to twist the story, telling everyone I was some psycho who set her up. But the evidence was too strong, and most of our mutual friends sided with me, or at least stayed neutral. My father-in-law gave me a couple of threats over the phone, saying he would make me pay for humiliating his daughter. I told him to bring it on. My lawyer assured me that, legally, they had no standing to do anything. There was no defamation if the information was true, and it most definitely was. I found out later from my sister-in-law that the rich guy ghosted my wife after he found out she was married. Apparently, she had told him she was single or in the process of divorcing me. Once he realized the drama involved, he bailed. That served her right, in my opinion. She tried to get sympathy from her father-in-law and mother-in-law, but they were too embarrassed by the public meltdown. Her father kept fuming that I duped his daughter, completely ignoring that she was the one who started this mess. My mother said it was best if I didn't engage with their tantrums anymore, so I blocked them all. The legal part is straightforward in my state, especially since we don't have kids. The property we own is mostly in my name or was purchased with my separate funds. My attorney made sure that was on record. She tried to claim she deserved some of the assets, but my lawyer pointed out that her cheating could be taken into account. To avoid a bigger fight, I ended up letting her take some furniture and smaller stuff she wanted. I just wanted her out of my life. I found an apartment near my workplace and moved in pretty fast. I wasn't about to let her or her family guilt trip me into anything else. In terms of revenge, I think I got what I needed. I humiliated her in front of our entire family, used her lover's pictures to catfish her, and revealed her lies for everyone to see. She tried to spin it to make me look like the bad guy, but nobody really bought that. She's the one who got exposed as the cheater who wanted a sugar daddy. Seeing her father's face when I played that audio was priceless. He had always acted so entitled, always bragging that his family was destined for bigger, better things. Well, I guess that bigger and better meant scamming her clueless husband. Except I wasn't so clueless after all. As for me, I'm just trying to move forward. I'm focusing on rebuilding my life, and honestly, I feel a weird sense of relief. Sure, this entire ordeal was messy and heartbreaking, but at least now I know the truth. I'm glad I didn't just roll over and let her keep stringing me along. Sometimes you have to face the ugliest parts of people to see who they really are. And as messed up as it is, I'd rather know than live in denial. That's the story of how I discovered my wife's secret online affair with some rich dude, catfished her using his own pictures, and exposed her for the lying cheater she is. It cost me a marriage, but I gained my self-respect. And I got to watch her entire plan crumble under the weight of her own lies. At the end of the day, I'll consider that one hell of a victory.